Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be. Welcome to our live stream, and we appreciate you being here. Thank you for joining us. Now, just as a reminder, we're going to be talking about a subject that can affect every single person who lives on planet Earth, whether it be fear or guilt. We're going to be talking about that today because it's a real thing in so many people's lives. And even if we think we've got over it, well, have we? Only we know, and we only know that by our reactions as to regards fear or guilt. But what's it really like to be fearful and to have guilt? Well, it got me thinking. I like to use a video. In my house right now, I have 3 kittens, not that they're mine. They're somebody else's kittens, but it reminded how even this morning when a plane went over the house, they ran behind the chair. It was something new. They'd never heard, never seen, and they reacted by running away. So it got me thinking, let's look at the animals to see what happens when they become fearful.
А нам все равно, твердо верим мы в древнюю молву.
Wake up.
So you heard the laughing, and sometimes we do laugh when we see things happening. But is it that simple in our own lives? Sometimes we really struggle. We really find it very hard to cope with things. Well, let's bring our guest in and let's ask a lot of questions. If you feel like you need to ask questions, you've got something going on, please put them in the comment. We want to be able to give some practical help so we can understand what's actually going on. Now, to help us, let's get our guest on. Good afternoon, Astarte. Looks like it's nice and sunny in your place, like my place. Funny that.
Yes, funny that.
If you're wondering why I said that, guys and ladies and men, Astarte lives in the same place as I do here in New Zealand, and I've spoken to I've spoken to Astarte a number of times, and she's helped me understand things which, to be honest, I never really understood. So I'm very grateful for the help that Astarte has given me personally. So Astarte, fear and guilt, are
Wow,
they
do they
real
paralyze or
fears?
what? Yeah.
Mm,
How's about I give a couple of dictionary definitions so we're really clear what we're talking about? I've got them right here.
cool.
Fear is a universal function and it leads to avoidance or reduction of harm. And it depends on what we've learned in the past about what can protect us in any potentially dangerous situation. And we have lots of different things that we can do in order to react to fear. Guilt, on the other hand, is something we feel when we realize that we've caused harm to another. It's a natural emotional response and it's self-focused, but it's also highly socialized and it's highly relevant in a social setting, because to feel guilty, we rarely feel guilty for ourselves, although that does happen sometimes. Most of our guilt is related to somebody else out there or something we've done that's caused another person some harm or grief. So that being the basic definition, I guess our question is going to revolve about what we can do to lessen the negative effects of both of these very highly charged and potentially dangerous and health harming emotions.
Mm.
So do you have some questions you want to
Yeah,
lead
we'll have
this
a look
way?
at a couple of examples that I know happen all too often. So a person gets this fellowship, gone out of the J-dubs, they all of a sudden get a knock on the door. Now, quite often, I've heard people say, yeah, when they knock on the door, they go and hide. They're very fearful of the J-dubs either knocking on their door, and right now they're getting letters, and a lot of that is triggering them and they become very fearful. Is that, give us your impression on that.
Yeah, it's a very normal response because people become fearful of things like authority. Now, presumably the leadership, the elders are regarded as somebody who can induce fear because that's programmed into us from a very, very early age, or from whenever we go in, we learn that the elders are the ultimate, and they're the ones that provide us with so-called answers. Yep. Whether or not those answers are effective depends on the situation. But quite often, if we've been disfellowshipped, or when we've chosen to leave, and we get that knock on the door, instantly all our old fear and guilt comes back into ourselves, and we feel it really strongly. And of course, to mitigate that, the sense of self-harm that can come from that, we go and hide. And sadly, not facing your fears or not addressing your guilt can actually lead to physical and emotional health issues. So what I'd really like to talk about is how we can mitigate those emotions and what we can do to grow through those emotions, because emotions are merely a way of telling us that something's up. And then if we use emotions wisely and stop and think how we can deal with them, or ask for help from somebody who might know, and I believe we've got a number of coaches around now that can help people feeling that. When we know how to deal with the fear and when we know how to deal with the guilt, it makes it much easier for us to perhaps face that challenge.
Okay, cool.
So, do you want to know how to mitigate those things?
Well, I know how I've handled it in the past.
Do you want to share what have you done in the past?
Well, here in Palmerston North, they've known me because I would come and give public talks in their Kingdom Hall. The ones from my old congregation in Paiatua would see me, even in Wanganui, and they would stand and look at me. And I just got sick and tired of people looking at me. So I started to wave at them. They don't know how to act. It was a very simple thing. I started doing that, and the fear of them, gone. I just waved. I had to do nothing else. They turned around, they didn't know what to do, they shut up, and they stopped staring at me. That was my simple way of being able to do it. And I know another person that person who was on their judicial committee, whether it was right or wrong, it doesn't matter, but his face came up in the newspaper. And it triggered the fear of taking all the way back there. What that person did was grab the newspaper, put it in the cat tray, and let the cats deal to it by pooing and weeing on it. And that little simple practical thing they did solved that particular problem at that time.
Yeah.
And now when that name, or I don't think they have seen the person, comes up, there's not the fear of that person anymore. So that's two simple practical things that have worked. And not everybody can do that, obviously, because you might not be in the frame of mind. But how do we get around it?
Well, obviously, as you suggested, brazening something out. So when you're being brazen, you're actually rising above it and facing the fear, and not so much hitting it, because we're not actually getting into any physical hitting, although you can hit your hand if you want to. That's a really good way of building some power into your attitude. You can hit your hand and brazen it through, or you can make it funny. Now, with a cat urinating and pooing on the paper, well, that's something that belittles that image, isn't it? And so you're actually making that problem smaller. And if you're making the problem smaller, it's not so scary. Yeah. So that's two really good things to do. One is to become brazen about it and say, well, look, what have I got to lose here? And face it straight on, or make it a laughing stock somehow. And that's why people tell jokes about things like that, because they're lessening their fear by making it into something they can laugh about. Laughter is a very big, powerful solution to many negative emotions.
Yeah.
So fear and guilt are two emotions which are based on one's beliefs.
Right.
So if one has been raised, as in the J-dubs, with fear and guilt being pushed into you, and raised with a lot of do's and don'ts, and if you don't comply, you're bad and you won't get accepted, etc., etc. It does ultimately come down to it being belief-based. And likewise, guilt is based on a belief that one has done some wrong, which obviously, if you have done some wrong, that's a really good sign. If you've upset someone, or you've said something that caused another person to be upset, the best thing to do with that is to make reparation.
Yeah.
Now, certainly in New Zealand, there has been a very small move in the Justice Department to make reparation. Sometimes the perpetrator and the victim are put face to face in a controlled situation, and the victim gets to tell their story so that the perpetrator can actually see and feel, if they've got that in them, exactly what they've done. And that usually helps them to make reparation. The whole idea of fining someone is to make reparation, but that doesn't do the emotional reparation. I think it's really important that we conduct ourselves in such a way that the other person knows we're sorry, and it's easier then for them to forgive. So in terms of guilt, if you feel guilty about something, face it and apologize for it. And if you can't see the person that you've wronged personally, then write a letter, or even just write a letter and perhaps burn it, just so that you've written it and you've let the energy of the words go out into the universe. And that can help you feel a lot better.
Yeah.
Depends on what it is that you're feeling guilty about, really.
Yeah.
But if it's about a set of beliefs, then you have to start asking yourself, are those beliefs serving me? And if they're not, there are ways to change your beliefs. And I think that's a really important thing that people can do for themselves to obviate that guilt.
We just had a comment, or a question really, come in. Why do we feel pain when we feel anxious or feel nervous when we feel guilty? I had those in the past, and that pulls me back from doing any progress with myself. What would you encourage there?
Well, I think that anybody who's feeling physical pain and anxiety, I think it would behoove that person to either seek one-on-one help with a coach or mentor or somebody who can, or a counselor, to work on where that guilt is coming from, because the anxiety is an after effect of feeling the guilt.
Yep.
Anxiety is another thing altogether, and it can have numerous causes. Anxiety can be related to what you're thinking, but it can also be related to what's going on in your body. Hormonal changes can cause anxiety. Chemical changes in the body from drugs can cause anxiety. So anxiety in itself is a side effect of guilt and fear. That's not to diminish it at all. It's a symptom rather than anxiety is not an emotion, it's a symptom. So we really need to get back to those two emotions, because fear and guilt are the two things that we can actually deal with. The anxiety will go when the fear and guilt have gone.
Okay, cool. Okay, so what happens if somebody just, they want to get rid of it, they might even watch this live stream, and they're still struggling? What would be a very simple first practical step to be able to encourage them, to get them some help and some support to slowly move forward?
Now, there is the group called Dare to Dream. Are we looking at talking about that today?
Yep, by all means.
See, the group Dare to Dream is access to help. People can go to Dare to Dream, sign on and become a member, and it's a closed group. So everything in that group is really, really secure. And that's where you can either pair up with somebody who perhaps might be able to help you, or ask for help from one of the coaches. In fact, speaking to you about it would be a really good place for them somebody to start, because then you can match them up with a coach who will be able to help them very specifically. Yeah. So I'd say that would be one of the options. Another is to actually look at becoming mindful. Mindfulness practices have become a very popular thing now. What mindfulness is about is being aware of what's going through your mind, observing your thoughts. And it comes from a principle of what we call removing oneself from one's thoughts, because your thoughts are just happening. Now, you can either let the thoughts happen, in which case you probably have no power, or you can step outside of those thoughts and allow yourself to watch those thoughts. Now, this is the first stage of mindfulness, is observing your thoughts. Because when you move yourself out of the thoughts, then you can watch them, and you're not in it. Do you know what I mean by in it? So you're not in the problem, you're observing the problem. And as an observer, you can have a passive view and start to look at what's going on in your thoughts. So it's almost like you can have a conversation with yourself. You can have the observer you, which is your witness, we are witnesses of ourselves, not just of Jehovah. And that's everybody. We all have that capacity. So when you become a witness of your thoughts, then you give yourself the power to observe those thoughts, become mindful of them, and see whether they're serving you or not. And if they're not serving you, if those thoughts are not useful, then find a way to move out of them. Now, if you can do that for yourself, fantastic. Change that thought into something positive, or seek help. And there's plenty of help out there.
Yeah.
Hi.
That,
you and me
that would,
and
yeah.
the other.
Yeah, that's all that needs to be said is help. If somebody doesn't know how to say something, just the word help in a message to somebody.
Yes. I need help.
Yeah. Even if you don't know what to say, type it in.
Yeah.
Type it in a message.
It doesn't matter. Start. Open your mouth and start. Seek help and ask for the specific help you want.
Yeah. How many people actually need help?
I don't need help all the time, but I do need help sometimes, as you know.
Yep.
Shane and I help each other, folks, just in case you want to know. If I'm feeling a bit down, then one day I was feeling down and Shane brought me some flowers, and it was all I needed just to bring myself out. And other times Shane has come to me for help, and we've done either an NLP process or just talked it over, because talk therapy is great. Chatting with someone, it really, really helps. Yeah.
Will there ever be a time that you or I will never need help?
Only when we're dead.
Well, that's something not to look forward to. But anyway. Okay, so getting back to fear.
Do we need help?
Folks, for those ones who's watching, if you get a chance, ask a starter about the blue apple. We won't talk about the blue apple now, but it's very interesting to do that little exercise about the blue apple. And it does work. I know one person who was very upset, and a starter did help them. And then they asked about the blue apple, and a total change of mindset happened. And the problem, basically like a blue apple,
just disappeared.
So there are tools that can help us.
That's what works for that person. I mean, different people need different tools, which is why it's worth having a toolkit. And that's what coaches have. Coaches have a toolkit.
Yeah, so just while we're on there, so the tools that you guys have as a life coach or a therapist, like we've got in the group, can we remember and use those for later on?
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
For instance, if we talked about something like line of time therapy, it's a way of going back into the past in a safe way where your mind has full control over your trip into the past. It's time travel, not physical time travel, it's emotional time travel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a way to go and address emotions and feelings from the past from a safe perspective. So you're not actually you become an observer in your own life. You actually put yourself into an observational situation at a past event which had a traumatic effect on you, potentially. And you can heal yourself from that perspective. It's just really, really wonderful. Cool. So once people know that process, they can do it for themselves.
Yeah. Okay, so fear and guilt. Let's get back to that for a minute. We sort of sidetracked, but it was good because it helped us to understand a few little things that go along with the fear and the guilt.
Absolutely, the process of coaching, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so we're fearful when we come out of the J-dubs.
Yep, it's pretty scary out there in the big bad world because that's how it's painted.
Yep, and it's not. But we've still got it. Where did that fear start from? You mentioned briefly when we started. Where does the fear come from?
Fear comes from, all sorts of places, actually. It's something that's natural in us. as those cats demonstrated in the video at the beginning, there are events that can happen in our life which cause us to go and then either run away, jump, fight, whatever it is that we need to do. I don't know if you know, there's people talk about the fight or flight reflex. Well, there's another one, fight, flight, and freeze. So a third way is to freeze. You go, and you become immobile. You just can't do anything because you're frozen. Of course, the saber-toothed tiger's just going to jump on you and eat you.
Yeah, that would happen.
So usually those three responses depend on the event itself. Fight, well, if you're caught in a corner, a cat caught in a corner will probably go and then get out.
Yep.
So you may end up with a scratch and no cat.
Yeah.
So that's one way. The other way is, like, for instance, if you get a woman who gets accosted in the street by a guy, she might just, if she's got any wits or any skills, she'll punch him in the nose and smash his nose so he's going, ah, and then she'll run while she's got the chance. Because let's face it, a guy is more likely to outstrip a woman if she just runs. So you've got to hurt him first to stop him running after you, as a for instance. But you can't do that to an elder.
Why not?
Because it's not done, is it? You can't do that. It's so severely the other elders. However, if you're no longer a Jehovah's Witness, then they've got no hold over you. And if it's appropriate, when they have no hold over you, you smash them in the nose and you run. And it could be metaphorical. It could be a metaphorical smash in the nose. You could tell them just go away, leave me alone. I'm not interested. Because you don't have to let them into your house.
Nope.
Just tell them straight, I am not interested. If you go and hide, they're going to knock on your door. How many times? 5, 10, however many times it takes for them to get you. But they can't get you if you won't let them. They can't get you without your own permission. So one of the things to remember.
What about a text and a message?
Well, how can a text? It's just words, sticks and stones. I mean, give me an example of a message which might.
Well, there's a lot of messages going around the place at the moment where if somebody makes it public, they do not want to be a J-dub, they will get all sorts of things to emotionally blackmail them from come back, Jehovah will look after you, he'll get it all sorted, to I'm not going to be your friend now. And anything in between, they get it. Now, if a person's not prepared for that, they can be really fearful.
So my suggestion is if you get a text of that nature, share it with someone who's out.
Good.
Get another perspective on it. Don't bottle it up. What's the point in bottling up? It's good. Bottled up pain and fear are just going to do damage to your body. So this is where you have to be mindful of yourself. Okay, I notice here I'm feeling fear.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you can say that to yourself, you're observing. Now, when I feel fear, I don't feel good. What is it that I can do to help myself feel better? And there might be a whole bunch of things. One might be just ignore it. If you can ignore it, great, that's the simplest. If you can't ignore it, if it keeps mithering in your mind, going over and over, then you have to do something with it, because that mithering is going to cause you some personal unhappiness. It's not a good thing to feel. It's going to be bad for your body in some way or other, and probably will generate anxiety. So talk to someone. Who do you know? Who can you trust? Shane, anybody on Dare to Dream, because that's what Dare to Dream is about. It's the support of all sorts. Seek a coach. There are plenty of us who can help with that sort of thing. Or just seek a friend who's been out for a while, or who isn't even in there, and said, well, what would you do if you got a text like this?
Yeah. And of course, there's the Life After JW Facebook group.
Of course, yeah.
You know, there'll be plenty of people who've had to deal with it and can give some very practical help.
Yes, yes. So don't be alone with this. Don't be alone with your fears, because fear can kill. Fear can cause heart attacks. Fear can cause all sorts of problems. So don't sit on it. Get it out there. Share your emotion and get a better opinion. A reframe, a different way of looking at it.
Yep.
That's probably the best thing to do.
Yeah.
Definitely. Anything else on any other questions with regard to fear?
It all resolves around similar things. And so you've answered with regards to knock on the door, messages, and maybe at this time, if anybody who's watching has a situation that you'd like help with, put it in the comment. Let's talk about it. Let's get some practical things.
We won't give your name or anything. It's just there could be some really useful ideas in there.
Yeah.
Well, maybe
so please.
Maybe we can have a look at guilt as well, because guilt is merely something that goes on in you to tell you that, oops, you've mucked up somewhere.
Yep.
Now, it could be a really big thing or it could be a really tiny thing. Either way, the best way to proceed with that is to address the issue. Now, if you can, talk to the person whom you feel you have wronged. Let them know that you regret what they did. What you did. You can say sorry, and if you can, make reparation.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, a kid may have stolen some money out of mum's purse and bought something, and mum finds out, and suddenly kid feels really upset. The way that the child might choose to respond is, okay, yeah, I know I did something wrong there. Can I do the dishes for a week to make up for it? If mum thinks that's an appropriate response, then mum will certainly accept that the dishes can be done for a week.
Okay, so that's in a practical sense. Yep, that's a practical sense. What happens if somebody makes a choice? So they decide to leave the J-dubs, or we've got a friend who's going to leave the J-dubs and be with us, or whatever the case may be. They then feel guilty because they're letting their family down, or letting a friend down, or letting the congregation down. How can we help with that sort of guilt?
I think the first thing to let the family or friend or congregation know that it's not them that's the problem, that the feeling is within yourself. You have every right to change your mind about what you believe. Every right on the planet, because that is a God-given right. Mm-hmm. We have a right to choose what life we want. If that life means that there are some people who are going to miss us, then you can say, well, look, I'm sorry if you're going to miss me. That's just how it is. But I feel a compulsion to live an alternative life to the one you're living. I do not want to be part of that. You're most welcome to contact me. I will always be here for you. If you're not going to accept my contact to you, then that's a sad thing, but I shall learn to live with it, and I shall get used to it over time. Because
so would there be a fear then, like with a lot, of losing their family? So they tell the family, the congregation, exactly why, what, how, and when, and then the fear and the realization that their family is not going to talk to them, and they're left abandoned.
I have that experience myself, and I have accepted that my daughter has chosen her way of life, and the fact that I'm no longer in her life, I'm sad about it. Time has healed, however, and the grief that was associated with that feeling of longing for my daughter and her family to be in my life has lessened over the years. So it's like with anything, grief does heal. probably the first 2 years were the hardest, just as losing someone you love. I mean, that's exactly what happened. I lost not just my daughter, but her whole family. So from that perspective, I have been through the grief. I understand grief. I've experienced plenty of grief in my life, so I know how to deal with that. And for someone who may be new to it, there are ways of dealing with grief. And all you have to do is talk, open your mouth and ask for help. Lots of hugs, lots of friendship from other people. Find another way to deal with life. I have found a way of not having my grandchildren in my life by involving myself with my friends' children. So I have lots of kids in my life. I won't say surrogate grandmother, but I have interaction as a grandmother might with quite a few kids.
Yep.
And yeah, and the same with people who are of my daughter's age. I have some wonderful relationships with people who are of my daughter's age, and they come to me and ask me questions, and I'm able to help in a way that a mother might. So I have found ways of filling that space in my life, if you like. It's not the same. It would be lovely if it was my daughter and my grandchildren, but it's not. And I have learned to accept that. And I can talk about it without bursting into tears. And this is what happens when you learn to accept over a period of time. And so I guess that's the nearest I can think about how other people might be feeling on that. It's something you will become accustomed to. And you replace those people with, they're not replacements, but they are people who fill a gap in your life that can work.
Yeah.
And it's sad to start with.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And just going slightly sideways, somebody's just said a lot of us feel guilty just being happy outside the J-dubs.
My first question is why? Why? Have you analysed why you feel? What is it exactly that makes you feel guilty? Because until you know what it is that's making you feel guilty, you can't address it. When it's just this, I feel guilty because I'm not in the J-dubs. What is it about not being in the J-dubs that makes you feel guilty? When you've worked out what it is, what that little item is, because it'll probably just be one or two little things, then you can deal with those things. Talk to a friend. Perhaps, this is something that you can do with a friend who's of like mind. Say, okay, I feel guilty about just being outside J-dubs. Can you help me? So the friend will then come up with some questions. And through a process of distilling the responses, you learn a little bit about yourself. And then you can start dealing with that aspect of the guilt.
Yeah.
So don't be an island. I think that's the big solution is don't be an island. Don't try and do it all yourself.
Yep.
Talk to people. There are lots of us.
Yeah. You can just put a message in the Facebook group as well.
Absolutely. That's where
you're not going to be judged. You're not going to be judged. You're not going to be bashed. Yeah. We're here all to support. And it doesn't matter. You've got to keep talking.
Open up.
Open up.
There's nothing worse than suppressed emotions because they'll kill you.
Yep.
They really will.
And your happiness will soon disappear and go down the bottom of a rabbit hole. You don't want to be down that rabbit hole. You want to be out of it. You want to continue to be happy. One of the best ways, I reckon, with regards to the J-dubs, is show them you're happy. If you want to wake somebody up, it's going to be very hard to talk to them about their beliefs, the doctrines, whatever they're feeling. But if they see you being happy and enjoying life, and they see you doing this, they'll be going,
and being free and following your passions.
You think about what the J-dubs teach. Oh, being part of that world, oh, they're horrible, they're drunkards, they're going to sleep around, they're going to do this, they're going to do that, and they're really unhappy.
Wrong.
They're very wrong. We know that by the ones that are in our lives. And the more we look out there for those individuals, we realize they've lied to us.
Yeah. The other thing about guilt is that it's a breach of one's values. I've talked about values before. Values are a pretty important part of you finding out who you are. If you can work out what your values are, usually you will find that any guilt you feel will be about a breach of one of those values or more. And that will also help you to work out what it is you're feeling guilty about. Because going back to that previous question, a lot of us feel guilty about just being happy outside J-Dubs. What's the value that's being broken in there? Is it a value that you really still hold, or is it one that was foisted on you by the J-Dubs? If you don't hold that value anymore, then you have nothing to feel guilty about. And the guilt will just disappear.
Okay.
Turn into dust.
Yep. So apart from the value side of things and working out whether it's broken one of our values or damaged it in some way, is there any other practical things that we can do to help with looking at the guilt side of it to help us
Absolutely.
sort of evaluate things and start going in the direction we want to go?
So if you've gone against one of your values or your personal standards, then you can either deal with it by repressing your feelings. Now that I can promise you will lead to ill health, because as soon as you start repressing anything, including guilt, then you're going to start creating negativity in your body. So you might like to then look at reframing that sense of guilt. And if you actually work out what it is that's the guilt is about, what that value, broken value is, then you can make reparation. Now, if it's just a general feeling of guilt about being happy outside J-Dubs, because that's actually a really, really big one, and I'd say it's an incredibly common one. What exactly is wrong about being happy? First of all, that's the reframe. Is there anything wrong with being happy? Why we're born to be happy. That's a human right, is to be happy, to have our basic needs met. If you like, you can come back to that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I mean, our first need is to have somewhere to live that's safe, secure, a roof over our heads, in other words, food in our tummies, clothes on our back, and someone to love. Those are the basic needs. And if you've got those things outside, or whether you had them when you're inside, you can still have them outside. If you've got something missing, then you need to get that fulfilled, because without that, then you're actually second guessing yourself the whole time. So if you haven't got friends, get some friends quickly. Join Life After J-Dubs. Talk to people. Start to form the relationships. There is a woman in America, and a while back she was having problems. I met her through Facebook, on Facebook Messenger. And because I didn't give up on her, I just kept asking her questions and making a few suggestions. And suddenly one day she got it. And she turned herself around pretty much overnight. And most days I get a little message from her saying, got up this morning, feeling happy, done this, done that. And I'll feed back to her the same sort of thing and tell her she's doing an amazing job. Her life has just totally turned around because I stayed with her. And that's what a friend or coach will do. They'll stay with you until you've made the flip over, the turnover to the new way.
Yep.
And that's what we do.
Yeah, we did just put up a map. Where in the world are you? And quite a few people made a comment on there. You might find somebody pretty close to you that could be helpful. I know it's a bit harder on the internet sometimes. It's a little bit easier, but there's always ways around it. So we've just had a comment come in now. We were taught that happiness is associated to pleasing Jehovah and fellow J-dubs, but not ourselves. We were taught to be self-sacrificing.
My first question is, do you still think that's true?
Okay.
If it's still true, well, you better blooming well get back into the J-dubs then, hadn't you?
Ooh. Is there any other option? Do we have to go back to the J-dubs if we want to do that?
Well, if you believe that this is true, because it all comes down to belief, you see. Guilt is a product of a belief that leads you to think that you've done wrong. If you haven't done wrong, and if you learn that happiness is more than just being associated to pleasing Jehovah, it could be that, but you can do that without being a J-dub. You don't need to be a J-dub to please Jehovah, if that's the way you want to go. And your fellow J-dubs, well, why don't you just please your fellows around you? Be a giving person. I'm a people pleaser, believe it or not. I like people to be happy. If somebody isn't happy with what I've done, then either my day job is a massage therapist. So if I haven't actually given them the treatment that they came for, I will not charge them. That's my absolute guarantee. So that is my way of not feeling guilty about not having pleased someone. More often than not, when I put that to people, they will say, well, actually, I do feel a lot better, despite the fact that you haven't actually fixed that one little thing that I wanted fixed. I enjoyed that massage so much, I'm going to pay you anyway. And that's so I don't have to feel guilty about it because they got something they didn't even know that they wanted, which was just a feel-good feeling.
Yep.
But
okay, so we slowly work through all that. We're out of the J-dubs. We've gone through the areas of grief and everything else that we will go through leaving. We get to the other side. We're starting to live our life. Does that mean we'll never be fearful?
I don't know. I get fearful about things quite frequently. Do you? Yeah, it's normal.
Sometimes, not too often, but sometimes.
Fear is a natural reaction to stuff that's going on around us. I can walk outside and I can see a bee outside, and I'm not afraid because I'm not afraid of bees. But I can look in the sink and see a cockroach and think, ah! But I can overcome my fear of cockroaches as long as I've got a jar under its lid. And I can put the jar on top of the cockroach and slide a piece of paper or the lid underneath and take the cockroach to the other end of the garden and let it go. Or pop it over the fence to the next door neighbours.
Yeah, I do something totally different to that, but that's all right.
Yeah, well, whatever I believe that cockroaches have a right to live. They're pretty amazing little pre-dinosaur things, but I don't want them in my house. So that's how I deal with them.
Yeah.
One this morning was on a sink and I actually couldn't deal with it. So I had a rubber glove on my hand and I just went boom. That one didn't last very long, but cockroaches are welcome in my garden, not in my house. And that's my rule. That's my value.
Yep.
It's not one of my highest values, but...
Yeah. So what happens if we're on the other side, we're trying to get on with life, but then we start wriggling our way back to a fear that was back here when we were in the J-dubs? What can we reframe it? So just go back over the reframing thing.
Yeah. If you've done it before, you can do it again. Talk to someone. Funny that. Talk to someone. Because
I think you've started off saying with these cockroaches. Not going
we've got some cockroach questions now.
They're not going extinct. I smash them. Yeah, well, that's
They're
about
not
what
going
I
to
do
sleep
too.
anytime soon. No.
Okay, so going back to reframing, I know that I'm framing these cockroaches. No, I'll leave the cockroaches out for a minute. So reframing, we've done it again. So just refresh our memories. We've got one of these values that is here. It might be a nice round circle, and now it's got a dent and it's been damaged, and we've got to do some panel beating.
So what might the value be?
So that's the first question. Ask what the value is.
Yeah. What's your own value? And you can't dent your values. They just are.
Yep.
Okay, let's take I have a value called self-care.
Right.
Right. So it's really important to me that I look after myself. I've got a chronic condition and I have to look after myself really, really well. Now, a little bit later today, I've been invited to a garden party, and I may well have a glass of wine or a glass of beer or something. I may. Probably will. Now, I have this value that I'm going to look after myself, and alcohol isn't particularly great. Certainly, wine isn't very good for me. But I might allow myself to have one just for the pure enjoyment of the flavor of it. So I reframe it. I will give myself permission to have this little treat, and then I'll go a week without having another glass of wine, or at least a week. I'll probably several months actually, because I don't have it very often. But you can. It's not a dent in my looking after myself. Part of looking after myself is being able to have pleasure with other people.
Right.
And if having a glass of wine with friends is pleasing other people, then I will do that. Because I know that once I get home again, I will be eating really clean food and drinking really clean fluids. So, okay, give us another one. We can give us another example. So perhaps one of your values. Dare you?
No comment. No values. Values.
Because you're about looking after other people as well, aren't you?
Values. Can I dial a friend? Call a friend? I don't know. One's not coming to my mind at the moment. Start, eh?
Okay.
Thank you.
So love is a value.
Okay.
It's a very special value. But
Yep.
I come from a perspective of love, and if I'm feeling a bit aggro about something, I think, am I giving myself love here? Yeah, I can give myself love here, but if I'm giving myself love, then I don't feel aggro. So it completely turns the argument on its head.
Okay. Yep.
Then I look at the problem as it is, which is somebody did something and I didn't like it, which is a very different thing to feeling aggro. I can not like something and still feel happy and still feel love. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm just going
And
to
that's
go.
about, again, it's about removing yourself from the problem. That's what reframing is about. Take yourself out of the problem.
Because we did put up a list of the aspects of values.
Yeah, there was a sheet I think you posted on the page.
Yeah, we got that. I'll see if I can track it down, because I looked at that when it first came up, and I believed it was really good the way that it was done.
Well, I
was
saw
just
it on my Facebook chat to you. It'll be on there.
no. Let me show. Did it go into there? Oh, there she is. That was easier. Okay, core values list. I wonder if we can share that. Just try and share that for a minute so that everybody can see it. Share screen. Yeah.
Yay!
Let's make that bigger. Okay, so we've got authenticity, achievement, adventure, authority, autonomy, balance, beauty, boldness. We can all see them there. Because I looked at it, and I had a piece of paper, but I'm not going to say I've got it anywhere here at the moment. But I found that very useful because some of those I had not considered to be core values.
It's not an exhaustive list either. It's just a few. But different people have, I mean, they may not be your core values, but they could be somebody else's.
Yeah.
And that's what's important. It's not about everybody having the same set of values. My daughter was very quick to raise right at the beginning of our dispute that we had different values. And I said, well, yes, of course we do. Because we're different people. But you don't have to dislike someone because they've got different values from you. I mean, you and I have got different values. We've got a couple which might be similar, but they're different. And that's just who we are.
What we'll do is I'll try and put that up while we're talking about it, and then I'll put it up later with regards to values, because that does go in hand with guilt and what we're talking about.
And with fear, because, well, no, not so much with fear, because fear is more an instantaneous response to an external event. And fear can it could be a life-threatening fear. It could be a fear of what might happen, which is really an empty fear because it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
And can be mitigated by taking evasive action.
We'll just put that up now. It's not going to be in the comments, but it is going to be in the group. So it might help some to be able to get that.
Cool. Any more questions?
Somebody's just put up one of the core values, me time.
Yeah, cool.
Well, that was a comment before. Yeah, so it comes under self-care. What happens if somebody does have some me time and you just go and have it and they get all upset because you haven't spoken to them for 18 hours, 24 hours, 36 hours, 48 hours, or whatever?
Sounds to me like that's time for a conversation. You need to let them know that you have me time and that's sacred time for you, and it is not to be interrupted. And that it's nothing to do with them. It's not about you ignoring them. And you might say, well, look, I'll make contact with you to let you know when I'm free.
And so if you don't communicate that and just do it because you just
you do it anyway because it's your time. But if there's somebody who's particularly needy of you, then you've got to decide, do you really want that person to be so needy of you? And there would be a conversation to be had around that. Does that?
Right.
Yep.
No,
me time is great. It's very important to have, self-care time, whatever that is, whatever it looks like.
Yep.
It's about you taking self-responsibility. And however, if you have an appointment at 4:00 and you book your me time for 4:00, then you're cheating, because if the appointment was there first, then you honour what was there first.
I see. Yes. Yep. Unless your appointment is me time at 4 a.m.
Well, that's your me time appointment. So yeah, great, take it.
Okay, so looking back on everything we've talked about just briefly, because you can go into a lot more depth. Practical steps in trying to get over the fear. Just summarize it in three or four different points. Just the practical things we can do.
If it's something, I think probably we're talking about things we're not talking about saber-toothed tiger type danger, are we? We're talking, most people fear something that's much more easily managed than a saber-toothed tiger. I think we're talking about people coming knocking, people sending texts. That's empty fear. It's sure, it feels real, but it's not real in the sense that it's not going to cause you any immediate harm. So it's time to take a deep breath, get mindful about it. Okay, so what's this fear I'm feeling? Okay, it's based on a text and somebody's telling me I'm wrong for doing something. Is that true? So ask yourself lots of questions. Have a conversation with yourself about the validity of the threat. Yep. And then if you need to, talk to someone like Shane, myself, any of the other coaches, or even just somebody on Life After J-Dubs or Dare to Dream. Just chat, open it up to a conversation.
Yep.
Don't suffer alone. That's just not worth it. If, however, you have J-Dubs knocking at the door and you don't feel up to facing them, go and hide in the cupboard. Go for it. There's nothing wrong with not answering the door. That's absolutely your right.
And we don't need to feel guilty.
It's nothing to feel guilty about.
No.
It's absolutely your right to privacy. And you don't want those people spoiling your privacy.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I do want to say thank you very much, Astarte. It's been very enjoyable, very insightful, and hopefully some of the points we've been able to talk about today will be of benefit. One thing that is coming up for those who are on the live stream and who are going to watch it is something that we have every second weekend, and I'll give you a little hint after I show you this. So this weekend coming, we're going to have a new host in the Zoom catch-ups. It won't be me, but we're going to have somebody with a very sweet and lovely and charming personality. I've given you a clue. It's one of our female members. And she will look forward to being able to see you there. Now, who that's going to be, you'll have to turn up on the Zoom meeting, which we'll start posting the time shortly in the next day or so. And by all means, please come and join our new host, meet some new friends, and you might have an opportunity that you've been thinking about something. It's an opportunity to ask ones who have possibly gone through the things you're going through. People have moved on. They've been successful. They've been happy. And also keep in mind, and we'll just play a little video, there is a thing called Dare to Dream. It's another group that works alongside Life After J-Dubs because it's a group where you get one-on-one support. It's not for everyone. It's a group that if you have a goal, we can support you to get to that goal when you work at what you want to reach. It is available for everybody. We give support in the Life After group, but it's more intensive, more helpful, more practical. So we'll say thank you for being on the live stream. We look forward to seeing you again. And by all means, take hold of the opportunity to be part of the Dare to Dream group. And we'll see you again shortly on our next live stream.